I was thinking today. Whenever I walk to work, I consider why. It's not that I don't know why. It's more that I feel like I shouldn't know why. I feel like this life should feel more meaningless than it does. All I really do is get up and go to work and then come back home. I have my cats and I love my cats. It's good to take care of them, and they are the reason I get up in the morning most of the time. I'm not saying that I wouldn't end up getting up anyways. Eventually, I'd have to, unless I just laid down until I died. But it seems like a lot of people who have a lot more going for them in life than I do complain a lot about their lives being meaningless or about feeling like they're trapped. And I don't feel the need to complain anymore. And I'm more restrained now than I was for a lot of my life. But at the same time, I'm much freer. Yes, it's the freedom to fall, the freedom to suffer, the freedom to be alone, but it is freedom, and I like that freedom. I prefer to have the freedom to live or die as I choose, even when I don't like the world around me and the choices that I'm given by it. Sometimes I wonder if that's just cope, but at the same time, I really don't think it is. This is something that I've been thinking about a lot, mostly because I have been thinking a lot about people who are a lot less lucky than me, and how they don't seem to think that their lives are bad. But people who are much luckier than me seem to always have something to complain about. I remember first noticing this with authority figures when I was growing up. Basically, every authority figure around me, in hindsight, was a little fascist. You know the kind. The person who has very little power and likes to use it as much as possible. And you also know that people like that always like to complain about the people who they have power over. No matter how much leverage they have, no matter how much they can get away with, they always feel like they are being oppressed by the people they oppress. The endless refrain from them is always that they are being disrespected. And often this disrespect takes the form of the slightest disagreement, or someone asking questions about what they're being told to do, instead of just following instructions without question. I've always found that the more power a person seems to have over you, the more they complain that they are being disrespected anytime you don't comply immediately, or in the manner that they had in their head. They expect others to be compliant and be mind readers, and when that doesn't happen, they throw a tantrum. But of course, these tantrums are not tantrums. They usually come in the form of long speeches about how you need to respect them, and if you respect them, they'll respect you. And what I've learned over the years is that when they say respected in a relation to themselves, what they mean is always either fear or to be treated like an authority, obeyed without question. And what they mean by respect when they talk about you is to be treated like a person rather than an animal. So what they're really saying is if you fear them and obey them, then they will treat you like a person. But if you do not fear them and obey them, they will not treat you like a person. When I was growing up, I often played along with people like that. But the moment I found myself in any position where I didn't really have to listen to them, I would just ignore them. To some, that seemed to be confusing. My father in particular seemed to think, once I was making my own money and living in my own home, that I would do whatever he said anyways and tolerate all of his drunken antics. And he seemed surprised every time he tried to test that theory out and found that it was very, very wrong. As if the understanding of power dynamics somehow managed to escape him despite having been in a position of power for a lot of my life. I don't really understand how a person fails to understand when they are no longer in a position to dominate or disrespect or control another person. And it's strange to me that I don't understand that, because I'm autistic. I am very bad with social cues, but I can understand pretty easily when power dynamics shift around me. When I was young, I was very much a pessimist. I was and am a fan of the works of Friedrich Nietzsche, a fact that has done a lot to direct my perception of things. Though I think I misunderstood Nietzsche when I was young. In fact, I know I did. Now that I'm a bit older, I have a pretty good grasp of what he was saying, and I feel like most of it was pretty stupid, but a lot of it was very insightful. Nietzsche had problems with women, with democracy, with the idea that power is not a justification for doing literally anything you want. And in the end, I think he understood that he had problems. I think he understood because in the end, he went insane. Friedrich Nietzsche went insane because he suppressed empathy as hard as he possibly could. And when it finally came out, while hiking in the Alps, coming across a man beating a horse for not moving fast enough, he ran to the horse and hugged it and then cried out, "I understand, poor thing. Mother, I've been a fool. And then he collapsed. And that was the last time he was fully lucid. From then on, his mind was eaten away. As a practitioner of chaos magic, a syncretic mix of various techniques used in different magical traditions, I recognize what happened to Nietzsche as the result of abuses of paradigm jumping. Paradigm jumping is the technique by which one forces oneself to believe a thing, regardless of what they previously believed. It is a useful trick in magical practices because magic runs partially on belief. But if you do it too often in order to avoid dealing with things, like Nietzsche's unwillingness to deal with his own susceptibility to pity, which was a recurring theme in his most famous work, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, like his subconscious trying to show him what his greatest danger was, by continuously suppressing this empathy without dealing with it, however one might deal with it, he created dissidence within his subconscious and superconscious. This dissidence eventually manifested as insanity. Often it manifests as demons or horrible night terrors or other unpleasant things. In modern psychology, this is just considered the results of repression. Freud famously said, "We repeat because we repress." But in reality, I think it's more likely that we repressed because we repeat. I'm not the first to ever say that you have Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari to thank for that idea. But the more I think about it and the more I watch others play it out, the more obvious it is that they were right. Nietzsche could not stop feeling pity. It was an all-consuming force that he forced into the background, crushing it into the recesses of his mind until it began to ferment and do something more dangerous. This is a problem that I have faced at times in my life, mostly before I became really self-aware enough to understand what was happening. All kinds of hallucinations and delusions followed from that. But when I decided to take a stance of radical honesty with myself, driven in part by the works of Friedrich Nietzsche, I went through a very quick and very brutal assault from inside my mind, or rather the parts of my mind that had been repressed, tried their best to maintain that repression. But I had learned a few things by then, and I simply informed the hallucinations that they were not being helpful, that this indirect, heavily symbolic, impossible to parse wave of nonsense and self-abuse that they were heaping upon me and, by extension, on themselves, was not doing anything to benefit me. And I wanted them to stop. They are, after all, parts of my mind, and the last thing any part of my mind would want is to hurt me, because they are me. To hurt me is to hurt themselves. To kill me is to kill themselves. After this, we had a short discussion and came to some agreements about how my mind was to be divided and who was in charge going forward. Since then, I haven't really had the same problems. The last time I went to a psychiatrist, they tried to give me antipsychotics because I admitted that I was hearing voices and had hallucinations. But these things have not been a problem for me so far since we worked that out. I guess the tie-in to how we started this is, I feel like I live in a world full of people who complain endlessly about their lives. And I feel like I have a lot that I probably should be complaining about, but none of it really feels like something I care to complain about. I actually really like my life. It's not perfect. It's not great. But I do like it. It's mine. Anyways, that's all for now, I guess. If you listen to the end of this, the 3 people who probably did, leave a like. Or hell, leave a comment.